Today we will be adding and subtracting fractions. And so the key on adding and subtracting fractions is to come up with a common denominator. So as we look at the two numbers here, 3/4 and 2/3, the denominator, the bottom number, is not the same. So we need to make it the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply each fraction by a factor of 1, because 1 doesn't change the value of the number. So here, this fraction here, 2/3, the denominator doesn't have the factor of 4, so that's what we're going to multiply it by. Here the 3/4 does not have a 3, so that's what we're going to multiply it by. And again, we can get away with doing this because look at these numbers. 3 over 3 makes 1. And 1 times the value of a number doesn't change that number. It just changes it to an equivalent fraction. So we go ahead and multiply across. We've got 9/12, and then we're adding 8/12. And so now we can compare these two numbers because they have the same number of, the same denominator, the same number that makes it a whole. So 9/12 and 8/12 makes 17/12. And that's how many 12ths we have. So we have over 1, so let's go ahead and change it to a mixed number. So basically we're dividing 12 into 17. And 12 goes into 17 one time with 5 left over. So we're going to write this answer as 1 5/12. Moving on to the next problem, we've got another set of numbers that do not have the same denominator. So we look at the factors here, the denominator's factors, and 9 has factors of 3, and 9 and 1. Well, it doesn't have a 5, so we need to multiply it by 5 so that it will have the same factors as the other fraction. Same thing with the 5. It doesn't have a factor of 9, so that's what we need to multiply by. So we go ahead and multiply across, and now I've got 25/45 minus 18/45. And so I can go ahead and subtract those two numbers, and that leaves me with 7/45. Well, looking at the next one, I've got 11 and 9, so same sort of scenario. The 11 does not have a 9 as a factor, so that's what we need to multiply by. Just as the 9 doesn't have an 11, so that's what we multiply by. So we go ahead and multiply across. I've got 27/99, and then minus 77/99. So I do that subtraction, and when I do that, 77 from 27 gives me 50, but since there's more, I'm taking away more than what I have, it's going to end up being a negative 50/99. That would be my answer. Well, looking at our next set of problems, it's a little bit different because there's some common factors in those denominators. Looking at 16 and 8, they both have a common factor of 8. See, I can divide 16 by 8, and I can divide 8 by 8. So all I have to do is come up with that other number that will make 16. See, all the 8 needs is a 2, and that will make 16. So I didn't need to change the 5/16 at all. So I'll leave that the same, and I'll subtract. Now I'll go ahead and multiply across here. I end up with 6/16. So when I do the subtraction, notice how again I've got more negatives than positives. I'm taking away more than what I started with. So we end up with a negative 1/16. And my next one, 7/9 and 5/6. I can't multiply 6 by a number to make 9, but they share a common factor. See, I can divide both the 6 by 3 and the 9 by 3. So if I look at these two numbers, let's take a look at just their factors. So you have the factors of 9 are 3 and 3. The factors of 6 are 3 and 2. So you see how the 9 doesn't have a 2. And so that's what I need to multiply it by. Just as the 6 here doesn't have that extra 3. So that's what I'll multiply it by. Now when I do that, notice what happens. See, I multiply across, and now I've got a common denominator. I have 18 in both of the denominators. See, 2 times 7 makes 14/18. And then over here, multiply by the 3/3, and I'm left with 15/18. And so I can go ahead and add these two numbers together, and that gives me 29/18. So from this point, I can just do some division. I can divide the 18 into 29, see how many times it goes in there. Looks like it's only going to go one time. And when I do that subtraction, I'm left with 11. So my answer is 1 11/18. And looking at the next one, same sort of thing. You see how 9 has a factor of 3. 15 does as well. So that's why I don't want to multiply each of the fractions by the other's denominator, because the denominator should be bigger than they need it to be. See, the 9 only needs the 5, so that's what I'm going to multiply by, the 5/5. The 15 needs that 3, so I'll multiply by 3/3, and I'm left with 10/45, and I need to take away 21/45. So I have that same scenario where I have more, I'm taking away more than what I started with, so I need to do some subtraction again to start with, and I end up with a negative 11, that's a 21, not a 27 there, negative 11 over 45. And moving on to my next type of problem, notice I have mixed numbers here. And so with mixed numbers, what I need to do is start by looking at the denominators, coming up with common denominators, just like I had done before. So I have that same scenario where 9 has a factor of 3 and 3, and 6 has 3 and 2. So the 6 needs that extra 3, where the 9 needs that extra 2. So I'm multiplying it by 2 over 2. Now when I write these numbers, I'm going to write it as 1 and then that's a 2 there. So 1 and 4/18. And I am going to subtract 15/18. Now I wrote it in this form here, where I'm stacking the numbers, because it's kind of like column subtraction or addition, where it's sometimes easier to do it in that form. And what I'll do here, since I'm subtracting, typically if we have a situation in which we have to borrow, like for instance if it was, let's say 10 minus, actually let's come up with a little bigger number there, 20 minus 7. So I have to borrow from the tens place, so I would have enough numbers to come up with the right value when I'm doing that subtraction. I have the same scenario here. So in this case I'd end up with 13, but here I can't do the subtraction because 15 is bigger than 4. So I need to borrow. I need to borrow from this whole number here, change that to a 0, and then add 1. Now when I'm adding 1, in order to add fractions, you've got to have a common denominator. Same thing here. So I need to add 18/18. And so that's going to become 22/18. And now I can do the subtraction. So when I subtract these two numbers, that leaves me with 7/18. That would be my answer. Well, the next one here, same sort of thing. Come up with that common denominator. Now notice the 5 and 4 have no common factors, so I'm just multiplying by the other's denominator in this case. And when I do that, I'm left with 5 and 12. Let's see here, that'd be 20ths, because I'm multiplying by 4 times the 5. And then over here, I multiply straight across, so I'm left with 2 and 15/20ths. And I'm adding these two numbers this time. So when I'm adding, I have 12 and 15. That gives me 17/20ths. I'm sorry, 27. I forgot to carry that. I forgot to add the tens place there. 27/20ths. And 5 and 2 make 7. But I have a problem. See, 20ths is an improper fraction. So we're going to end up having to change that to a mixed number. And so we're going to add that 1 extra. So there's 1 extra number in this fraction. So we've still got that 7 plus 1 and 7/20ths. See, I got the 1 and 7/20ths by doing 20 into 27, which went one time with 7 left over. And so that would be 1 and 7/20ths. So when I add this, that just gives me 8 and 7/20ths. That's the answer I'm looking for. Well, looking at the next one, I've got to come up with a common denominator. Same sort of thing. Let's take a look at the factors that we have. 2 and 4 make 8, where 2 and 3 make 6. So I see that each of the denominators needs an extra factor. See, the 8 needs a 3, and the 6 needs a 4. So we're going to go ahead and multiply. So I've got 6 and 3, and that'll make a 24ths this time. And I'm taking away 2. That makes 20/24ths. So I get another chance at borrowing again because I'm subtracting. And notice how the denominators are the same, but the numerator, 3 from 20, I can't do. So let's borrow from the 6, change it to a 5. So we're borrowing 1 from the 6, and I'm going to add 1 to this fraction. So this time I'm going to use 24/24ths to make those denominators the same, so I can add them. And that makes 27/24ths. And So now I'll do the subtraction. 27 minus 20 gives me 7 24ths, and then 5 minus 2 gives me 3. So 3 and 7 24ths. Those are the types of problems you're going to see on tonight's homework. Good luck.